It wasn't the scream that startled the forest birds into silence. It was the silence that followed. A tiny, high-pitched yell had torn through the tall pines like a spark through dry leaves, and then, nothing. No rustle. No reply. Just a wide-eyed baby standing barefoot in the grass, mouth still open, toy phone dropped at her feet. The bobcat didn't move. It stood perfectly still, just a few steps away, its eyes locked onto hers. Not crouching. Not growling. Its muscles weren't tensed for a leap. They were, relaxed. Confused, maybe. Its ears weren't pinned back in fear or aggression, they twitched gently, trying to make sense of the small human before it. The baby, no older than 2, let out another short yell. Not a cry. Not a scream. Something in between, a frustrated, breathless outburst, like the kind toddlers make when a toy won't do what they want. The bobcat blinked. And still didn't run. Sunlight filtered through the trees behind them, casting long, angled shadows across the meadow where the encounter was frozen in time. The grass was wet. Rain had passed not long ago, its scent lingered in the air, earthy and metallic. Tiny droplets clung to the baby's legs, and her little fists were damp. Her hair curled slightly from the moisture. She wasn't cold. Just confused. Curious. Unafraid. There was no path leading into this clearing. No adult footsteps. No sign of how she'd wandered so far into the wild. The bobcat took one slow step forward. The baby sat down. She didn't run. Didn't cry. Just plopped onto the wet earth with the gracelessness only toddlers possess, bottom first, legs splayed, palms pressing into the grass. Then she picked up the toy phone and pressed it to her ear. She giggled once, quick and light, and looked back up. The bobcat tilted its head. It didn't make a sound. The air grew still, as if even the leaves were afraid to rustle. In the distance, thunder murmured softly, like a voice 2 rooms away. The clouds hadn't returned, but the weight in the air said they would. The breeze shifted and carried the sweet, heavy smell of damp bark and distant pine sap. The bobcat stepped forward again, slower this time. Its paws made no sound on the wet soil. Its eyes, amber and rimmed with black like old ink, stayed locked on the child. Still no one came. The baby reached out. Not in fear. Not in warning. Just an open hand, palm up, fingers wiggling. She offered the toy phone. The bobcat stopped, inches from the reach of her fingers. Then it sat. Its haunches lowered into the grass. Its tail curled slightly around one paw. It sat not like a predator watching prey, but like an animal trying to understand. Its chest rose and fell slowly. Its ears flicked once toward the woods, then back to the baby. The baby laughed. She made a bubbling sound with her lips and clapped her hands. The toy phone fell again, forgotten. She stared at the bobcat, blinking wide-eyed and wondering, like she might with a new neighbor or a puppy. Then, slowly, she leaned forward. The bobcat didn't flinch. It simply watched her, calm, patient, as though waiting for her to reveal something it didn't know it had forgotten. A few birds dared to chirp again in the distance. But still, no adult voice. No rustling search. No alarm. Only 2 living beings, face to face in a clearing that seemed to hold its breath. Then came the quietest moment of all. The baby laid down. Just like that, her small body slowly tipped to the side, her head resting on one arm, her knees curling. She didn't sleep, but she didn't move either. She simply watched the bobcat, eyes still curious, breaths shallow and even. The bobcat stood. The moment was too strange, too still, too impossible. And yet, no danger stirred. The animal paced once in a slow arc around her. Close, but not touching. Not threatening. Like circling something sacred, something it couldn't understand but wouldn't violate. Then, without a sound, it sat again. This time, just behind the baby. Not facing her now, but facing outward, toward the forest line. As though watching for something else. As though guarding her. The wind picked up slightly, brushing over the wet grass and carrying the soft creak of trees that had weathered many storms. Distant thunder again. This time, closer. The clouds had begun to gather in the western sky, their edges smeared across the blue like ash. The baby yawned. Still, no one came. But the bobcat stayed. Its ears stayed tuned to the woods. Its posture alert but not anxious. It didn't touch her. Didn't nuzzle or lick or interact the way a domestic animal might. It simply stayed. And in that silence, between thunder and tree creak, between rain-wet grass and toddling heartbeats, a strange understanding began to take root. Unspoken. Impossible. Real. The bobcat, once feared, once hunted, once untouchable, chose to stay. Not because it was tame. Not because it was trapped. But because, somehow, it knew. Something about the stillness. About the smallness of the child. The way she didn't threaten, didn't chase, didn't cry. The way she trusted, wordlessly. The way she offered the only thing in her hand. That was the moment the forest changed. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just, different. Softer. And though no one would believe it, not yet, not until much later, this was the moment when everything truly began. The moment a baby yelled at a bobcat, and it didn't run. The wind stirred low across the clearing, brushing the grass in long waves. Around them, the forest watched, silent, dense, and older than memory. Tall pines lined the edges like sentries. Beyond them, the underbrush thickened into tangled shadows, the kind of place where the sun touched the ground only in shards. But here in the clearing, everything was still open, exposed, and wet. The baby shifted slightly in her spot. A leaf had stuck to her cheek, carried by a breeze. She didn't brush it away. Her tiny fingers curled into the damp soil, then opened again. She was wide awake, yet strangely quiet, as if mimicking the creature still sitting a few feet behind her. The bobcat hadn't moved. Not really. Its eyes blinked now and then, slow and thoughtful. Occasionally, one ear would twitch, tuned toward some faint woodland sound only it could hear. But otherwise, it remained as still as the stones dotting the edges of the meadow, present, unmoving, patient. Rain hadn't started again, but the scent of it was returning. Heavier now. Less like mist and more like something preparing to fall. The clouds overhead thickened, muting the light. The trees leaned slightly in the breeze, their trunks groaning faintly as if protesting the weight of another storm. A sudden crack of a twig far off made the bobcat's head jerk. It stood, muscles tightening, tail swaying low. But then, stillness again. Just the moan of a branch and the shuffle of some distant animal. A deer, maybe. Or something smaller. The baby sat up, rubbing her eye with the back of her wrist. Her onesie was stained with grass and streaked with muddy dampness. A fresh red mark lined one arm, maybe a bramble scratch, maybe from a fall. But she didn't seem to notice. She simply looked around, blinked a few times at the dimming sky, then locked eyes with the bobcat once again. She didn't reach for it this time. Instead, she scooted slightly toward it. A few awkward inches. Then stopped. The bobcat didn't back away. They sat like that, just watching, while the forest began to exhale again. A pair of birds flew low across the clearing, their wings flapping hard to gain altitude before disappearing into the trees. Somewhere far behind the pines, a creek gurgled faintly, its flow louder now that everything else had gone still. And then, something strange. The bobcat turned, not toward her, but toward a corner of the forest. Not where the noise had come from. A different place. Its ears flattened slightly, not in aggression, but in recognition. its gaze fixed on a tall, dark tree with a hollow trunk. It stared for several seconds, long enough for the baby to look that way too. There was nothing there. Just shadows. But the bobcat kept looking. Then it took 2 slow steps in that direction, paused, looked back at her, then returned to its place behind her. Why? What had it seen? Or sensed? The baby seemed unaware. She had picked up a stick now and was gently poking at the wet dirt, drawing invisible shapes only she could see. She laughed once, softly, when the stick broke in half. The bobcat blinked slowly, then lay down. Its chest rested on its forelegs, tail stretched behind it, head upright and attentive. It wasn't resting. It was waiting. The first raindrops fell a few minutes later, light taps against leaves and soil, like someone slowly drumming fingers on a wooden table. The baby blinked at the sky. She reached up a palm and let the droplets collect. She didn't cry. Not once. She looked tired now, but not scared. Not even cold. Maybe she was too young to understand she was lost. Or maybe, in the presence of something so still and silent and watchful, she didn't feel alone. The rain picked up, soft but steady. It painted everything darker, the tree trunks, the patches of exposed rock, the backs of the bobcat's ears. Water streaked down the baby's forehead, gathering at her lashes. Still, no one called for her. No voice from the woods. No searching footsteps. Nothing but the rhythm of water falling through trees and the slow breathing of a bobcat that hadn't yet chosen to leave. Then, another odd thing. The bobcat stood again and circled once. It moved toward the same tree it had stared at earlier, the hollow one, paused, and sniffed at its base. Then it backed away and returned to the baby's side. Was it looking for something? Remembering something? This quiet pattern continued for nearly half an hour. The bobcat occasionally looking toward that tree. The baby exploring the space with tiny gestures, touching the grass, watching the drops hit her fingers, giggling once when a bird flew too low and startled her. But every time she moved more than a few feet away, the bobcat followed. Just far enough to keep her within its line of sight. Just close enough to step in, if anything came from the woods. At one point, the baby tripped and landed hard on her knees. She cried out, but only for a second. Then, just as quickly, she looked up, and the bobcat was already there, inches away, its head low, eyes wide. Not touching her. Not growling. Just present. The baby stopped crying. And in that look, between a wild animal and a child who hadn't yet learned fear, something passed. Not affection. Not understanding. But something like alignment. As if, for a flicker of time, they both belonged to the same quiet world. The kind of world where sounds were soft, movement slow, and time didn't rush to explain anything. Where a bobcat could choose to stay. Where a baby could feel safe. Where a mystery, silent and unsolved, waited just beyond a hollow tree. And neither of them knew yet, that something had already seen them. The rain had softened into a mist by morning. The clearing, once open and sharp under the afternoon sun, was now draped in gray. Dew clung to every blade of grass. A thick fog moved between the trees like breath. It was quiet again, quieter than the day before. But the silence no longer felt empty. It felt chosen. The baby was awake. She sat near the same place, her hair damp, her onesie darker now with dirt and moisture. Her toy phone was gone, swallowed by the forest or forgotten somewhere in the night. She didn't cry. She didn't call out. Her gaze wandered across the mist, slow and searching, until it landed on the same shape it had come to expect. The bobcat. Still here. It had slept nearby, on a dry patch under a pine tree's low branches. Its fur was matted along the spine where the rain had found it, but it looked healthy, alert, lean, and unafraid. It stretched, arching its back, tail high, then lowered into a crouch and walked toward her. The baby clapped. A soft, tired clap. As if she hadn't just woken up, but instead had been waiting. The bobcat stopped a few steps away, sat, and stared. Not blankly. Not with hunger. With something steadier. The baby reached for a fallen branch beside her and pushed it across the grass. Slowly. Toward the bobcat. A game she didn't know she was playing. A gesture she didn't know was being returned. The bobcat didn't touch the stick. It didn't move forward. But it didn't flinch either. It simply watched her hand. That small hand, muddy, soft, covered in dew, kept offering things. Twigs. Leaves. Once, a clump of dirt. Not to feed. Not to lure. Just to give. The bobcat never took anything. But it never left. Later that morning, the sun broke through the fog in narrow shafts. Steam rose from the trees, curling around branches in thin silver lines. The baby stood shakily and began to walk toward the hollow tree the bobcat had eyed before. Her steps were unbalanced but determined. She tripped once and sat down hard, blinking at the impact. The bobcat moved instantly. Not fast, not panicked, but close. It circled once, then settled beside her again. Like a living shadow. She leaned toward it. Not touching. Just close enough to feel its breath. Their closeness no longer felt strange. It felt natural. As if the forest had drawn a silent circle around them both, and nothing outside it mattered. No roads. No people. No names. Just presence. The hours passed without notice. At one point, the baby wandered toward the tree again. This time, she reached the hollow trunk. She looked inside. Nothing. Just dark, old bark. Some rotting leaves. Still, she stayed there a long time. The bobcat watched her from behind, its body low to the ground, head tilted. It seemed to know something about that place. But it didn't stop her. Instead, it slowly walked over, brushed lightly past her, and circled the tree once. Then sat, facing outward again. Always watching something she couldn't see. Later, she curled beside the base of the tree and rested her head against a root. She didn't sleep, but she stopped moving. And the bobcat, as if recognizing the shift, lay down as well. This continued for what could have been hours. There was no clock here. No way to measure time, except by the length of shadows and the rhythm of breathing. At some point, she reached out again. Her hand touched fur. Only for a second. The bobcat's body went still, but didn't pull away. She let her fingers rest gently along its side. Her touch was uncertain, like she was testing whether the creature was real. Her eyes were half-lidded now, calm but curious. The bobcat blinked. And remained. That touch meant something. Not in the way a pet responds to affection. But in the way two strangers acknowledge something unspoken. A line passed through. From that moment forward, their pattern shifted. Whenever she moved, it followed. Whenever she stopped, it settled nearby. And every so often, it would glance back toward the hollow tree, as if still guarding something unknown. The quiet mystery deepened. Because when the bobcat stared at that spot, it wasn't afraid. It wasn't curious. It looked like it was waiting. For what? The baby didn't ask, of course. She didn't have words for questions. But she followed its gaze. She felt the weight of its stillness. And when she rested again that afternoon, half asleep in a patch of sunlight just outside the hollow, the bobcat stood watch. Facing the trees. Head high. Ears sharp. That evening, the wind changed direction. The forest smelled different. Not of rain anymore, but of something human. A metal scent. A cold breeze that didn't belong. The bobcat rose and paced twice. It didn't growl. It didn't run. But it no longer sat. The baby stirred, then stilled again. And just as the light faded behind the trees, something cracked in the distance. Not thunder. Not wood. A man-made sound. And the bobcat turned toward the hollow. Its posture shifted, stiffer, alert, almost reluctant. It moved closer to the tree, glanced inside, then backed away again. And then, for the first time, it looked directly at the baby with something behind its eyes. Recognition. Regret. Warning. She sat up slowly, as if sensing the change. The air had gone still. A strange quiet settled over the clearing again. One not born of peace, but of pause. As if something was about to shift, and neither of them could stop it. The air was warmer the next day, but it didn't feel like comfort. It felt heavy, as if the forest itself had taken a long breath and wasn't sure when to release it. The mist was gone, replaced by a faint heat that shimmered above the ground. Leaves hung limp on their branches. The birds, usually chatty after rain, were quiet. The baby was restless. She no longer sat still for long. She wandered more now, hands brushing through tall grass, feet stumbling through soggy moss. Sometimes she babbled softly to herself, strings of half-formed syllables only she understood. She stopped often to look back, always to find the bobcat there. Always there. It didn't follow closely anymore. It walked beside her. Never leading. Never retreating. It was as if, in some silent exchange, they'd agreed to move together. Not as companions. Not quite as protectors. But as, something. A shape with two shadows. They passed the hollow tree again, and the baby paused. She stared into it longer this time, her head tilted. She crouched and reached her hand toward the base, but stopped before touching. Her fingers hovered over the leaves, and then she looked at the bobcat. It stared at her. But not the way it had before. It blinked slowly, once, then sat. And turned its gaze toward the tree-line. The baby stood. She turned away from the hollow and continued walking toward the clearing's edge. The bobcat followed. This shift, this moment of choosing not to reach into the unknown, was small. But it marked something. A decision made without language. A path redirected. That afternoon, the sun broke through in full. The clearing glowed with golden light. The baby's damp clothes clung to her, streaked with dirt and sweat. Her cheeks were flushed, but she was alert. She climbed small rocks, picked dandelions, scattered pebbles. The bobcat watched every motion, its ears flicking at every sound she made. She laughed once, sharp and pure, when a squirrel darted out from the grass and vanished up a tree. The bobcat didn't chase. It simply watched her laugh. There was something different in its eyes now. A kind of quiet ache. As if it knew something the child didn't. As if it understood what couldn't be kept. That evening, when the baby curled beside a fallen log and rested her head against her arm, the bobcat lay beside her. Not behind her. Not near her. Beside her. Their backs touched. Lightly. A thread of warmth shared between two beating hearts. Neither flinched. Neither stirred. They stayed that way as the sun dipped below the trees and the shadows stretched long across the field. And that's when it happened. A low sound. Barely a whisper. A voice. Faint. Male. Calling a name, far away. Not the baby's name. Just a sound, distant and unformed, like a memory trying to wake. The bobcat lifted its head. Its body tensed. The baby didn't hear it. Or didn't recognize it. She slept. The voice came again, closer now. But not in a rush. Not panicked. Not even certain. Just a call through the trees. The bobcat stood. It moved a few feet toward the sound, then looked back. At her. At the baby curled beside the log, cheeks damp, lips parted. It walked a small circle, indecisive. Then returned to her side. It stayed through the night. But the forest was no longer still. That night, under a sky full of stars half hidden by clouds, the clearing felt different. The hollow tree seemed to lean a little farther forward. The shadows near it shifted strangely when the wind blew. Something moved in the distance, not footsteps, not voices, just presence. And the bobcat watched it all. When the baby stirred near dawn, her first movement was a hand reaching behind her. For warmth. For company. Her fingers brushed fur, and she smiled in her sleep. But when the sun rose, something had changed in the bobcat's stance. It no longer lay down. It paced. It sniffed the wind. Its ears twitched toward the south, where the voice had come from. And then, toward the hollow tree again. The baby woke. She sat up slowly, rubbed her eyes, and looked around. She giggled at something unseen, a floating leaf, perhaps, or the tickle of a bug, and reached for a stick. She began her slow morning crawl toward the hollow. The bobcat stepped in front of her. Not harshly. Just once. Blocking her. She paused. For the first time, she frowned. She tried to walk around, but it moved again, gently herding her away. There was no threat. No growl. No teeth. Just a boundary. Silent. Final. She sat down, confused. She stared at it. It stared back. Something passed between them in that moment. Something heavy. The bobcat seemed older now, as if the night had added years to its body. Its gaze was firm. Not unkind. But resolute. It wouldn't let her near the hollow. Not anymore. She didn't cry. But she turned away. She stood and wandered back toward the center of the clearing. The bobcat followed. From a distance this time. The pattern had shifted. And deep in the trees, not far from the place where the voice had come, another sound echoed. A camera click. Soft. Far off. But enough. The bobcat stopped walking. It turned its face to the trees. It knew. And though the baby did not understand what was coming. Though she couldn't know what would be asked of her soon. The forest did. And the bobcat, already had. It happened not with noise, but with absence. By late morning, the baby stood alone in the middle of the clearing. Her feet shifted uncertainly, toes curling into the damp grass. Her hands were open at her sides, her expression quiet, not afraid, not upset, just, searching. Her head turned left, then right. Behind her, the log. In front, the hollow tree. No wind. No birdsong. No bobcat. The shape that had been beside her every moment, every hour since that first yell, was gone. No tracks. No sound of retreating paws. Just absence. The forest held its breath. The baby took a step. Then another. Her walk was unsure, but determined. She moved back toward the pine tree where the bobcat had slept the first night. Nothing. She circled once. Then stopped. And then she did something she hadn't done in days. She called out. Just a single sound. A small ah. High and questioning. Her voice broke the silence like a drop in still water. She waited. Nothing moved. She walked toward the hollow tree again. This time, the bobcat did not block her. She reached the edge of the hollow and crouched. She peered in, tilted her head. The dark space looked no different than before. But she stared longer. Her small fingers brushed the bark. She leaned forward and paused. Then, she looked up. Her head turned slowly toward the edge of the clearing. Her eyes widened. The bobcat stood there. Just at the edge of the trees, half-shadowed. Still. Watching. She smiled. A quick, bright burst of joy. She ran, or the closest thing a toddler can do to running, arms flailing, legs unsteady, toward the tree line. But the bobcat didn't move. It didn't step forward to meet her. It just stood, golden eyes steady. She slowed. Halfway there now. Then, for the first time in their strange days together, the bobcat turned its head. Not away from her. Toward something behind it. A figure. Not fully visible. But enough. A tall shape, standing still in the woods. No uniform. No flashlight. Just the outline of a man. Watching. Then another. Behind a tree, crouched. Holding something to his eye. A camera. The bobcat turned back to her. Its eyes didn't plead. Didn't panic. They softened. It stepped forward once. Then stopped. Then did something it hadn't done before. It looked at the ground. Slowly, it lowered its body, not in fear, not in threat, but in rest. It lay down, front paws stretched out. Tail curled. Head low. A position of peace. Of surrender. The baby blinked. Then, slowly, sat down too. Just a few steps away. They stayed like that, staring at each other, with the forest stretching wide around them and the world slowly waking behind the trees. The men stepped into view minutes later. Quiet. Cautious. One raised a walkie and whispered something. The other raised his hand as if to say wait. The bobcat looked at them. Briefly. Then back at her. And she, as if understanding something wordless, didn't move. Didn't speak. She simply sat, facing the creature who had been her shadow, her silence, her safety. The men approached. One of them called a name. Softly. The girl's name. She turned. Not startled. Just, recognizing. She stood. Wobbled slightly. And walked toward the voice. The bobcat didn't follow. She looked back once. Just before reaching the man's outstretched arms. He scooped her up, held her against his chest, murmured something into her hair. She didn't cry. She turned her head over his shoulder, eyes scanning the trees. But the bobcat was gone. No sound of movement. No crunch of leaves. Just gone. And in the place where it had lain, the grass was flattened. The earth was warm. The man walked her toward the others. One knelt down and checked her arms, her face. She blinked. Yawned. A second man took off his coat and wrapped it around her. They didn't ask where she'd been. They didn't need to. They had the photos. They had the footage. They had the silence. And though they would never understand the whole story, never know what had passed in the space between that first scream and this final moment, something in the forest had already understood it for them. Later that afternoon, long after the child had been taken away, and the men had cleared the site, one of them returned. Alone. He stepped back into the clearing and stood in the middle. He looked around slowly. No trace. No movement. But at the edge of the clearing, where the pines met the path, he noticed something small. The toy phone. Covered in mud. Still intact. He bent to pick it up. And paused. Beside it, a paw print. Large. Fresh. Facing the woods. He looked up, scanning the trees. Nothing. But he stayed there for a long moment, holding the toy, the print between his feet. He didn't speak. He didn't radio in. He just stood still. Because somehow, even he knew. The bobcat hadn't been lost. It had chosen to leave. Exactly when it was safe to do so. Enough to storm, but heavy with gold and gray, casting long streaks of light through the thinning canopy. The clearing, empty now, felt wider. The air had changed again. Not heavy. Not tense. Just, hollow. Where the baby had once stood, grass had begun to rise again. Bent blades were slowly straightening in the breeze, soft and slow. A pair of crows picked at the edges of the clearing, flying low and silent. The forest had resumed its rhythm. But far beyond that place, beyond the path, beyond the cameras and voices and boots, deep in a stretch of untouched woods, something stirred. The bobcat walked. The sun fell behind the ridge earlier than expected that day. Clouds had returned, not thick alone. Its coat, once damp from mist and rain, had dried and brushed clean from rubbing against pine bark and old moss. Its gait was even, unhurried. Not stalking. Not searching. Just moving forward. It paused near a cluster of rocks and sat, licking a paw once before glancing up at the sky. A hawk wheeled in silence above the trees. The bobcat blinked. Then lowered its gaze to the forest floor. There, nestled beneath a half-fallen log, was a tangle of fur and breath. Two small cubs, still young but old enough to open their eyes, shifted gently in sleep. One lifted its head at the sound of approach, ears twitching. It mewed once, soft and high. The bobcat didn't respond. It stepped forward, circled the log once, then lay down beside them. The cubs nestled into its side instinctively. And for a long while, nothing happened. No wind. No movement. Just the steady rise and fall of three chests in sync. Then, at the edge of this quiet scene, something unusual. A small, square shape, plastic, scuffed, red, half buried in the dirt. The toy phone. Carried all this way. Placed there. Beside the log. No human had come this far. No one had brought it. It shouldn't be here. But it was. The bobcat stared at it. Not with hunger. Not with curiosity. But with memory. It did not nudge it, did not sniff or push it aside. It simply looked at it. As though it understood what it was. Or what it had meant. The cub beside it mewed again, pawing gently at the bobcat's leg. The larger cat responded by shifting slightly, curling around them, sheltering them in the curve of its body. Behind them, a slow breeze moved through the trees. Light broke through the clouds once more, striking the log and the ground beside it. The red toy caught the light. It glowed faintly. Unmoving. Unexplained. Just there. A marker, maybe. Or an offering. Or just a memory placed where no one would ever look for it. The forest did not speak. It did not reveal what had happened. It simply held the story. And let the image stay. A bobcat curled around its cubs. A child's toy resting quietly nearby. And the wind passing through, like breath across a sleeping world.